Okay, in this lecture, we're going to take a look at the StopWatch Exercise. This is the code that one of my good students, Tim, has written. Hi, Tim. Thanks for sending your code. I really appreciate that because you're the first student who shared his code with me and everyone else. So you've done a really good job. In this video, I'm going to show you a few things that you can improve in this code. So let's go through what you have done so far. This is our main method. We have a loop that is executed twice. We start the stopwatch, then use thread.sleep to put a bit of delay in the application. Then we stop the stopwatch and display the interval or duration. Then we wait for the user to press enter, and then the loop is executed one more time. Let's take a look at the implementation of stopwatch. So in the stopwatch, we have a few properties: start and end time, a flag field called running that we use to check if the stopwatch is running or not. In the start method, if the stopwatch is not running, we set the start time and then set running to true. Otherwise, we throw an exception, and this is used to make sure that we cannot call the start method twice. So really good, well done. In the stop method, if the stopwatch is running, we set the end time and then set the running field to false. Good. And here we have a method called getInterval, which calculates the duration between the start time and end time. Now, what can we improve in this code? Well, the first thing I see here is that these two properties are declared as public. Remember the encapsulation principle? So the point of encapsulation is to put properties and methods that are related to a concept in a class, and preferably make those properties private, because those properties are the implementation detail of that class. We don't want to expose it to the outside world. Instead, we want to have public methods that work on those properties. We use these properties, in this case, these three properties here, to keep the state of stopwatch. We don't want the consumers of this class, in this case, this main method, to mess up with the state of stopwatch. We want to limit how this class is used. Remember the black box metaphor or the DVD player? A DVD player has a few buttons on the front, which gives you limited access to what you can do with it. Imagine if the circuit boards and ICs of the DVD player was accessible. What could have happened? So that was the theory part. Now let's take a look at the practice. The reason we shouldn't declare these two properties as public is this. Let me show you. So here we start the stopwatch, and now because I have access to those properties, start time, I'm gonna set that to tomorrow. And also, similarly, I can set the end time to last year. So see how I'm messing up with the state of stopwatch here? It starts tomorrow, but ends last year. Let's run the application and see what happens. So this is the duration. It doesn't make sense. So what we want to do is to declare these as private. And in fact, we don't even need a property here. A field is sufficient because we're not going to provide get or set access from the outside. So I'm going to get rid of these get and set here. Similarly here. And now because we converted these properties to a private field, we need to modify their name to match the standard naming convention, which means they should use camel notation and be prefixed with an underline. So with ReSharper, I can immediately fix this. Alt and enter, enter. If you don't have ReSharper, you need to do it manually by hand. So let's try it here. Underline and time. And note that now these two properties are not accessible from the outside. So I cannot mess up with the state of stopwatch. Good. Now, this running field, I want to put it close to other fields just for clean coding. And in terms of naming convention, it needs to be prefixed with an underline. Now, I'm not going to add this underline here because the problem with that is, look, I broke my code. I have to modify all these references here. That's why we use resharper. So with resharper, when you press Alt and Enter here, resharper automatically fixes all references to that private field. Also note that you don't need to initialize it to false because Boolean fields by default are initialized to false. And that's the reason this false keyword here is grayed out. So I'm going to remove that again with Alt and Enter. Enter. There is another interesting scenario here. Our start method takes a date time. So again with this, I can mess up with the state of this class. How? So I go here, instead of sending now, I'm going to send tomorrow. And similarly, in our stop method, I'm going to send last year. See, this is exactly like the code I wrote before when I access those properties directly. We don't want to mess up with the state of our classes. The class should always be in a valid state, which means these methods should not take a parameter. They should use the current date time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this parameter. Instead, use datetime.now. Similar in the stop method. And I'm going to use datetime.now. Note that end time is not compiled. And the reason for that is because I manually changed it to underline with a lowercase e. That's why I say you should use resharper as much as you can because it really helps you with your coding. So all these little things don't get along the way and waste your time. So what I'm going to do is to quickly fix this. Alt and Enter. Change all end time to underline end time. So I corrected both these references together. Now let's get back to the start method. This method is perfectly fine. But conventionally, we often do validation at the beginning of a method. So when someone reads this code, they can see what are kind of exceptions that this method can throw. So I'm going to reverse this if else. I'm going to say if it's running, throw an exception. Otherwise, do this. Now, note that resharper has grayed out this else block here. Why is that? The reason is if the stopwatch is running, we throw an exception, so this part of the code is never going to get executed. Which means we don't really need to add this else block here. If the control gets here, that means running was false. So this way we can get rid of an extra else and make our code a bit cleaner. So now put this back here and get rid of these extra spaces, and we don't need the braces either because it's just one line. The code is shorter and cleaner. We could do a similar technique in the stop method. So if we call the stop method when the stopwatch is not running, we could throw an exception. So this time we say if it's not running, I'm going to copy paste this line here and change the message. That's it. Otherwise, we get here and we change the state of our stopwatch. Okay, finally, get interval method. That's perfectly fine, but I just want to give you a quick tip here to make this a little bit shorter and cleaner. It's obvious that this method is returning interval or duration. So there's really no need to declare a separate variable and then return it immediately. If we were going to use this variable multiple times in that method, it made sense. But now it's kind of redundant. So we can get rid of that, which means the method is now only one line. And it's pretty clear. End time minus start time, and that's the interval. Okay? Okay, now let's take a look. So now that I've removed those parameters from start and stop methods, we cannot mess up with the state of stopwatch. So we remove this. And similarly here. One more tip I would like to give you here is we don't need to do a loop here to call thread.sleep of 1 millisecond 1,000 times. So we can simply put 1,000 here, 1,000 milliseconds, and get rid of an extra for loop. Now we stop the stopwatch. We display the result. I would like to add a bit of message here. Duration. And then before console the read line, I would say press enter to run the stopwatch one more time. It's really not required. It's not part of the exercise. It's my personal preference. Your code is perfectly fine. And one more tip here is console.writeLine method always calls toString on any object passed to it. And that's the reason this toString here is grayed out. So we can get rid of it, make the code shorter. And now let's run the application. So duration is 1 second because we had a delay of 1,000 milliseconds. And here's a message. Press enter to run the stopwatch one more time. And here's a new duration. Okay, that's pretty much it. Again, thanks Tim for sending me your code and sharing it with others. I hope you and everyone else who watched this video learned something new and that would make you a better developer. Thank you for watching.